and welcome back to another episode of the Awfully Irish podcast.
In case you didn't know what podcast you were listening to. How you doing, Scott? How's things?
I'm doing very well. It's early morning here, and I'm enjoying my coffee and getting to wake up and talk about AI and how the world may end. You know, it's just another nice Tuesday.
Another Tuesday for you, yeah. But Scott, for anyone who might not know you, how about you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a technologist by trade. I used to run an IT business and then had the opportunity to move into teaching. So I now teach as a teaching professor at the University of Missouri, where I get to talk about all things information systems and IT and how it relates to business. But one of my big areas of emphasis is emerging technologies. So whether that's something like blockchain or whether that's something like machine learning and AI and how it's going to change our world and change our business. And lots of great potential for changing things for the better. Lots of great risks as well.
Yeah, and AI is one of those things where people have great opinions about it or are terrified of it. And I think the major consensus would be terrified of it.
Yeah, I think there's reasons to be terrified. There was a couple of weeks ago, a U.S. general was talking about the fact that right now you can have AI deployed in military situations, but there has to be a human in between. So the AI may say, well, you should target this, and the human has to take a look at that and say, okay, well, yes, we're going to target that thing with the drone or whatever it is. But he said these ideas of drone swarms are going to be where you might have hundreds of drones coming at you, coming into your compound or something like that, are going to be so hard to deal with that you're going to have to take the human out of the equation. And so now you're going to put the AI in charge of the machine gun or whatever weapon it is. And that's where it starts to get really scary. And that kind of reinforces those people that think we might be headed toward a Terminator scenario, right?
Yeah. That's one of those things we want to avoid. Absolutely. You think with the risk that the AI can pose, we would consider slowing down a little bit, but it's not really the case. Like AI can do great things, like, I know for comedy, you could do like deep fake. I know you can do bad applications for that. If you're a gamer, you can upscale games. What else? If you drive a Tesla, there's the AI built in there. There's a couple good applications there. But, when it comes to warfare, that sounds fucking terrifying.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I look at the good applications because it looks like I might be a tad older than you two gentlemen, as medicine. Just a skosh. So
I just think you pull off a goatee better.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. I'm trying to have a thin veneer of sophistication here.
It's working.
I look at medicine. So there's been over 50 machine learning algorithms that have been approved for medicine. So you look at radiology, pathology, cardiology. Often these doctors are recognizing patterns, and we can have AIs that do a better job than humans at recognizing those patterns. So I think that's going to affect me in my lifetime, hopefully for the better. But we also know that these AIs are really based on how they're trained, right? So they're set up and they are very single-minded in this pursuit. And if we train it only with white males on how to read an X-ray, then we have a Hispanic woman come in and we use the same AI, it may not do well. So there's the whole area of AI kind of looking at sometimes called adversarial AI, or trying to understand what's in these black boxes and understand the decision making that's going on. So there can be all sorts of great things that can come about, but there can also be some bad consequences if we're really not looking at what we're doing. And I think you're exactly right. We're moving too fast, and COVID has kind of poured gasoline on the acceleration of the use of AI, especially in robotics and all sorts of areas. And even my profession being here in higher ed, we're starting to see colleges use it to decide who gets in. Once again,
that's scary.
Yeah, I think that's pretty scary. And I think that's an inappropriate use of AI. I tell my students, I teach a huge course of 600 students, so I can't grade essays. It would take me like 1.3 years to grade all the essays if I assigned them. I worked it out one time. And but I tell them, hey, why don't I just have an AI grade it? But that's not going to work out so well if I have somebody who's the next brilliant writer, right? So the next person is going to you think about famous writers or poets, and they had a kind of a different way of writing, a different style of doing things. If I have one of those people in my class, they're not going to fit the pattern, and therefore they're going to fail the class. And I certainly don't want to fail the next great writer.
Yeah, that is, again, terrifying.
Right.
Like it could just really mess up without knowing why. And that is a problem with, like, what you're saying, the hyper-focused AI. Like, before we started, you were telling us about this, was this paperclip thing?
Yeah.
It was an AI designed to make like paper clips, and then it was a game or something, and it just made the universe into paper clips or something.
Yeah, so just Google Universal Paper Clips. It's a game that you can play. It kind of has to do with a thought experiment proposed by an AI, I guess, thinker or ethicist called, his name is Nick Bostrom. And he had this idea called instrumental convergence, where you basically set an AI out to do something that may sound very benign, but that AI does not have other things built into it to kind of prevent it from having some unintended consequences. And so in this case, you play an AI. It's one of these click games, and it's kind of fun. I ended up spending about 16 hours on it the first time I discovered it. And your goal is to turn the universe into paper clips. You're just, harmless. You're just going to make as many paper clips as possible. But you find that, humans might get in the way. They might turn off your power source. And plus, they have lots of these great atoms that you could use to make paper clips with. And so you just keep on going. And you win the game by turning the entire universe into paper clips.
So there's an end to it, is there?
yeah, you can actually, there is in fact an end to it. And I don't know if it actually has a relationship to what the estimated size of the universe is or not. But as you go along, things get exponential. So you find these little exponential technologies where you can make paper clips at an exponential rate. And so that's another interesting thing about the game, is because humans don't think well in exponentials. Right? So we tend to think of things as getting linearly a little bit better, because that's the way we experience the world. I get a little bit faster at running. I don't exponentially improve in running. I get a little bit faster each day. But computers, as you know, tend to follow these curves like Moore's law for processors, where the processor speed doubles approximately every 18 months or 2 years. Well, that's an exponential. And when you have an exponential, it starts out kind of slow at first, but then the increases, go up dramatically. And so that's one of the things too about this game is kind of interesting, is you have to kind of think in the terms of exponentials.
I never thought of a game where you turn the universe into paper clips could sound so interesting, but yes, I'm sitting here in my chair and you've done it, Scott. Congratulations.
Yeah, no, that's definitely weird. But the whole AI and the universe thing, there's been like ideas put out there of using AI to explore the universe, or at least our solar system, and maybe the closer one, Alpha Centauri. What do you think about that? Using AI for space exploration, because we're squishy, we get hurt very easy, we last about a second in a vacuum. AI can just be fine out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to go. I think that this idea of sending humans in different places is not necessarily the best way to do it. And also, if you actually start to look at how are we going to get to places outside of our solar system, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort. And even if you were just to take something the size of a cell phone and try to accelerate it up to a speed that it could get to a nearby star within a human's lifetime, and even report back, well, that's going to take a lot of energy. And if you start to talk about putting a human on something like that, that's going to be even more difficult. It's interesting the way NASA is actually using AI. They're using this machine learning algorithms to help them speed up the discovery process. I think I read an article not too long ago that said that they get like 2 gigabytes of data like every 10 minutes from all the different probes and stuff they have out there.
Wow.
And so there's no way a human can process that amount of data. And so they use these machine learning algorithms to look at like radar data from a asteroid, and the asteroid's tumbling and it's in some orientation that's not, aligned with us and all that kind of stuff. And the machine learning algorithm can figure out what that asteroid looks like within a matter of a couple days, whereas the scientist working alone, it might take several months to figure out. So that's kind of one of the themes that you're seeing with how AI is being deployed right now, is people working alongside AI, not just like being replaced by AI. So even those doctors and radiologists and such are working alongside an AI. And it remains to be seen whether that means that the insurance companies here in the US tell our doctors, well, good, now you can see 10,000 patients a day and have even shittier healthcare for them.
Yeah.
Or whether it means that we say, no, wait a second, now you see 5 patients a day. We want people that have high emotional intelligence that can help Scott deal with, what he's going through as a patient. So it's there's lots of different problems with these AIs. Are we just going to use it to drive more productivity, to drive us to click on more things, to be more active in social media and waste our days away? Or are we going to use it to have more fulfilling lives? I don't know.
And it's weird how the algorithm does that to you, because that it literally tricks you into just staying on for hours upon end. It's mad.
Yeah, they all do. What was that documentary came out? The Social Dilemma. Was that it?
That was
that is terrifying. I recommend people to watch it. It just shows you like the reality of what's going on there, and it is dodgy. But even in I guess content creation, I don't know if it's an AI. I know we use I did different bots for say our Discord, or even to run moderation on our YouTube, like Nightbot or Meeseeks, blah blah blah. It's kind of interesting how anyone could really use them. Like I don't know, if you're trying to find a recipe, for the best chicken casserole, there's probably an AI that can help you. You want to run a YouTube channel, AI can help you. Blah blah blah.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how it's everywhere.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. One, do you know you're talking to an AI? You guys are probably familiar with these enough that you understand it's not a real person talking to you, or it says bot or something on Discord, and so you know what it is. But Google has this Google Assistant that actually can call people on the phone, and it sounds just as good as a human. It'll even add the ums and ahs, so the verbal tics, so it sounds like a human. But
that's weird. That's really weird.
Really weird. Yeah. So it's pretty weird system. But there are actually some times when you might want to talk to a human and to an AI rather than a human. So, for example, Planned Parenthood here in the US found that they set up a bot about sex, and they found that teenagers were much more interested in talking to the bot than they were to a human, because they felt more confident of being anonymous if they could ask, well, is it normal to feel this way? Or I had this dream, or, whatever it is that you're, going through when you're going through that time in your life. And it was much more educational, and they got much more engagement than they did from like their 1-800, talk to Scott about sex.
Yeah.
I'm sure that all your listeners are like, oh my God, that sounds awful. I would never want to do that.
Yeah. Do you get many calls on that?
Well,
no.
Hold up,
I got,
Scott,
my phone is open. If you,
you're not getting past that one, buddy.
We can change the entire conversation of this podcast, and I'm sure nobody would have a problem with it.
You want to promote it? No. Yeah, but that is pretty interesting. Like, and it makes sense. Like, you're not going to be wanting to talk to your buddies about it. You like, if you talk to an AI, like there's zero consequences of literally. You can say the most fucked up shit. Like it's going to be very like, okay. Say to your friends, they might not ever talk to it again. But yeah, like the whole idea of there being like no consequences is, I guess, appealing to some people. It's kind of like those chatbots that used. I don't know if they're still around on the internet. Like I think it was Cleverbot was a big one for a long time.
Hmm.
And you could just talk to that thing and it would just spew out answers for ages.
Yeah, I remember some of the early versions of that. I haven't kind of kept up with the chatbots. I know in Slack I've got chatbots that we are really more programmatic than an AI, right? So yeah.
Are you familiar with it's an AI app called Replica?
Mm-mm. Tell me about it.
Thomas, can you pull it up?
Yeah.
It's spelled with a K. So Replica is kind of like this AI buddy. So like it'll talk to like a normal person. It's being fed all this data from every user using it. Not like private stuff, just like general conversation, how to have a conversation. It'll even send you memes. So and it recognizes memes too. It's kind of interesting. A buddy recommended this to me, and it's pretty cool what it can do. Can you see Thomas's screen yet?
Yeah, it's coming up.
This thing.
So I need to
neat.
create one and everything, yeah?
This is this would be I guess the desktop version. The app doesn't have a person, as far as I know. It used to be like just an egg when I tried it. That's why like the egg logo's up there, and it was pretty incredible that it was just like nearly a normal person. Like you'd rarely ever figure out I'm talking to an AI,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, some AIs you'd make a joke, it wouldn't know what to say, it would move
Right.
on. This thing would like actually respond with the yeah. I'm surprised you don't know about that one. That was pretty big when it came out.
I'll check it out. There's been a lot of developments, especially in Japan, about using some of these kind of AI companions for people that are older and don't have anybody to look after them. So Japan is a situation that's probably ahead of a lot of countries in that they have this, not many younger people, but a huge amount of people in the upper ages that they're having a hard time keeping care of. And sometimes they're even putting these in some sort of form like a teddy bear or some sort of form like a physical robot, and being able to talk and have conversations. And they're finding that actually has the same kind of emotional response in some ways that we have with a person.
And this sounds a bit like an episode of, was it Black Mirror?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know. That's kind of interesting. Putting in a teddy bear or whatever. But yeah, some people have a bit of a freaky, I guess, desire with AI. Like I don't know. Has anyone ever married an AI yet?
Well, I don't think so. I think I have seen some pretty bizarre things where people have tried to like marry their sex robot and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to get to that topic if you're comfortable talking about it. Yeah, that's what freaks me out. Sex bots. Like, okay, sure. I think another person might be better, but a robot. I don't know. Like, where does that go? Where does that go?
And not anywhere good. Getting back to where we're at with social media and that kind of addiction, what we're seeing here in the US is teenagers aren't having as much sex. There's a huge increase in impotence among 20-year-olds, sometimes attributed to pornography, that you get these dopamine hits from seeing this porn, and then you need to see more extreme porn and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I think pornography, social media, other things that have kind of addicted us to this dopamine hit all the time, without challenging us. I think video games are interesting to me. I'm not a gamer, but I think that a lot of them, they provide some dopamine hits, but they also, the best ones seem to kind of always challenge your abilities, right? So they're just like at the edge of your abilities. And we sometimes call that a state of flow. And so I think that sometimes those can be bad and they can be addictive to certain personalities, but I think that, there's lots of factors that are just not good when it comes to sex and human sexuality. And I think these sex bots are kind of a weird side effect, if you will.
Yeah.
mean, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and my concern, it comes from, incels, like involuntary celibate guys. Like, I don't know, like you ideally you want those guys to like improve upon themselves and try get back out there. But if the idea is that you can just have one of these bots and fucking hide in your closet for the rest of your life, that's pretty weird. Because then remember we're talking about like people trying to marry their sex bots.
Right.
It goes to a weird place like that as well, which isn't good for anyone.
Yeah, and just how they, these incels and how they view women, and
Yeah.
it's pretty bizarre. Yeah, and and unfortunately, that's also led to violence. We've had
Yes.
several
Yes.
bad incidents here in the U.S. So,
How does it leads to violence? How does it like?
I don't know, guys who think the world's against them and that women are like only after a certain kind of guy, and
No.
I see that they see women as less, so they probably hate crimes, whatever.
No,
yeah.
I don't think we've had a problem like that in Ireland before. Maybe we have, not as far as I know.
Oh, but we're on the way. I mean, we're constantly copying American culture. We're
Americanized, but
like a year or two off.
I hope not. But no, yeah, we're very Americanized. It's kind of cool. But yeah, that is a dodgy place, where AI could either help these guys or it could really fuck them up.
Right. Yeah. So
Like that replica thing I was talking about, I don't know, like improve your social skills maybe. Yeah, stuff like that. But then the sex bots, you're like, you'll be stuck in a room with that thing for about 10 months and no one will ever see you again.
Right. Well, I don't know. It's a weird world, and it's certainly human sexuality has a huge range of what it's been for forever. So it's kind of difficult to say that that's bad, but it does seem like that's a trend that is not good, especially in younger people. Oh, I've had a thought there. Oh, well, those kind of bots, that's another thing too. It's like, could you replace a teacher with an AI, right? So could I just train it with all the conversations I've had with students and then have that be my office hours? So tell my students, we'll just connect to Replica here and she'll answer all your questions about the paper that's due.
I would love to believe that academia won't destroy itself. But the way you're saying that, it sounds like it could.
Yeah, I think you could. And unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of pressures to, reduce costs and do other things like that. And I think, one of the things we have is this competing idea between, we want to be excellent, but then they want me to have 600 students. And I'm like, well, I do my best, but there is a trade-off there. If I had a class of 30 students, I'd be much more excellent. There's just kind of that trade-off, and unfortunately some of these things are being sold to institutions as a way for them to stay ahead or get ahead, and I don't think it's good, because I think learning is basically a social process. That's one of the reasons that there have been waves and waves of technology over the past 20, 30 years that have looked at how could you do education that's technologically mediated in some way. And some of those have had some success, but by and large, they haven't caught on in the mainstream. But I think that's mainly because it's, it's a social process. You interact with your teacher, you interact with your fellow students, your colleagues, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how you're dealing with it in the United States right now, or even with your own class. But myself and Thomas are also in college, and
nice.
I definitely feel what you're saying. Like we're stuck here at home doing nothing. You barely have the motivation to get out for class. There's not, like, I'm barely learning. I have to do my learning outside, like catch up on the stuff. But you're learning very little from it because it's just on the screen. You learn about the same amount as you would from like a YouTube video, because it's essentially the same thing. So I don't think this kind of virtual learning is going to catch on. I really hope it doesn't, because you could do so much more in the classroom. But how are you seeing that as a professor?
Well, I have to agree with a lot of that. I think that kind of, at least here in the US, our structure of having a 4-year experience is probably not the best, because really what you want to do is you want to help students solve problems, not memorize stuff. Okay, you mentioned YouTube. YouTube is awesome. Okay. Coursera is awesome. There's all these different platforms out there that have really great curated content that's going to be as good or better than what I can do. And is there, it can be used to, augment my lessons or other lessons, and for you to have your kind of just-in-time training. So when you go out and you are now in a job and you need to brush up on how to do something, you go to YouTube. Right. And you look at that. So let's teach students how to manage projects, how to deal with their workflow. And let's have them learn how to evaluate really good sources, right? Because there's good sources and bad sources. And I can tell when my students go down the rabbit hole and they've turned right when they should have turned left on YouTube, because I'm like, yeah, I know which video they watched and this guy's full of shit. And therefore their answers, that they've come up with are full of shit, but they haven't had the ability to kind of evaluate that. So I would rather see something that's more like a 2-year college experience that's then followed up with kind of a mentoring. So we say, okay, Thomas, you did your 2 years, you had your beer and football and all the other fun stuff that we do in college, and got to have that social experience, and you got some base level understanding. And now Scott's going to be your mentor for the next 4 or 5 years. And so when you encounter a problem, or you're encountering some difficulty, or you have something when it comes back where your boss says you screwed that up, you have someone to talk to, someone to get some advice from, someone to guide you through the next steps. So I would really, I'm hoping that the coronavirus actually triggers a massive reevaluation of how we're doing higher education, because I just don't think it's a system designed for, a century ago when we were preparing people for factories with our secondary education. But higher education was really just kind of an elite thing, right? But now we're using that as a way to prepare people for the workforce, and we haven't really retooled higher education to deal with that. So,
do you think that makes it worth less?
Do I think it makes it
worth less? Like you see some people that complain, like, I have a master's degree and I can't get a base level job.
Right. So there is a lot of underemployment. So it used to be here that you could start out with just a high school degree, a secondary degree, and you could go into, banking, and you could work as a teller, and then you'd work your way up to account managers, so forth and so on. Now you can't really get a job as a teller without having a bachelor's degree. And, you kind of wonder, well, why is that? Well, it's because that bachelor's degree is really becoming a credential that HR, human resources people look for to mean that you can, plow through things and be reliable. And so in many ways, higher education is just a vetting system for human resources departments. So, I'm not saying that's all it is. And obviously I wouldn't be in it if I didn't think there's a lot of other values, but I think that's one way that you can look at it. So I think we have to deal with that and have multiple pathways. Why does everybody have to get here in the US a bachelor's degree? Let's have multiple pathways for education and multiple ways to credential. Google has actually come out with their own credentialing system. It's like an 8-month program, and I think it's relatively cheap, like $1,000 or something. And they will consider it to be the same as getting a undergraduate degree. So when you apply to Google, they will consider it as if you had a 4-year degree, and they're going to roll this out in project management and other areas. So if other companies start to use that, your local bank there starts to use that as a credential that they will accept, then that changes the world. So I don't think higher education is going to change until the hiring departments change. So I think that's where we're going to see the big change coming in.
No, I agree with you there on that. The education system is fucked. Like over here in Ireland, I know the entire human anatomy, but I don't know how to pay my taxes.
Right.
And that's after 14 years of school.
I had 6 years of business, and sure, like I had to figure it out. I do taxes afterwards. But yeah, It's fucked. Like I said this to someone else fairly recently. When my dad was in college, and it was a while back. It would have been about maybe 40 years ago. If he wanted to do agricultural studies, myself and himself would have done the same course because it hadn't been updated till last year. Which is so outlandish. Like it wasn't updated. Like I don't know. Agriculture is advancing fairly rapidly. Like, come on. But it's not the only course that was like that. It really is. It's designed for like maybe the 50s at this point. Like secondary education, you're not really learning much. If you got a computer class, that really helps. But if you don't, and you're stuck with like, as Thomas was saying, like human anatomy, whatever, it's kind of stuck in the gutter.
Right.
A lot of stuff you're never going to use, or you don't have the options. Like we have optional subjects, but sometimes like you get what you're given.
It's interesting. Education is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And so I do think we're going to see a lot of tech companies kind of coming in to quote unquote disrupt this area because they see a lot of money being spent on stuff that's fairly inefficient. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were saying that something like $2 billion is spent teaching calculus, of all the tuition that all the people are paying. And it's basically taught kind of the same all around the world. And so there's a company that says, we're going to develop the best calculus course ever, okay, and try to get all these colleges to adopt it as a credential. So you go online, pay $30 to take this awesome calculus class that would, use modern techniques and maybe bots to help you understand whether you're doing well or to tutor you. And we would replace all these professors. And I think that's a great way where we could see AI taking some subjects that don't necessarily have to be updated, right? I don't know that there's been any new developments in calculus, at least that I've seen recently, or statistics, but outsource that crap. And then let's have the time to update and provide meaningful courses, for those other specialties. How do we apply calculus when we're talking about programming or programming a game or 3D graphics or something like that? How does that become useful? Or even in agriculture, how does that become useful, especially as we're using more, drones and things like that?
Yeah. And if AI comes and it takes away some of the, I guess the courses, or say even does you out of a job, AI teaches people about itself. Where does that leave people like you? Like ideally, what would you want to do if, I guess, that scenario happens?
Yeah, I think that, there's lots of different pathways we could go there, but let's assume that it goes in a good way. I think humans are great at creating new ideas. They're great at taking things from different elements and putting it together. That's not something that AIs always do the greatest at. There are some AIs that have learned things like games and how to solve different puzzles, but being able to take information from one area into another. So I would hope we would have more creativity. I think we might have more discussions, more podcasts, more people being able to meet each other through Discord or other means and providing connections, because I think that's where humans thrive and that's where humans do well. And so that's where I would hope we would go. And I would hope we might start to see something where we can spread the benefits of AI and automation, and not just automation, but autonomous systems to everybody, right? So whether that's some sort of universal basic income or just a tax on robots, how that works, let's make this a opportunity for humanity and not just a opportunity for Amazon to sell us more shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're winning this year or last year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like small businesses getting mauled by not being able to open, especially here. They still haven't been able to open in a year now. And I got a package from Amazon this morning. Like 2-day delivery. Like they're just dominating right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I guess in big business, it's probably a lot more AI being used. Like we see with Tesla and their cars. Do you think that could become an industry standard in cars, like self-driving AI?
I think it's going to have to be. I was really more of a skeptic until I met a fellow professor, Dale Musser, that is here at the University of Missouri. He actually has worked a deal where he lives in San Francisco. He's been teaching remotely for many years, and he works with some companies out there that are doing these autonomous systems. And he tells me that in San Francisco, there's about 20 companies that have self-driving cars. That are at the level 4, meaning that a human could take over. But there's one that's actually been licensed to do level 5, where there is no human. So you get your app out, and this car comes up, and there's no human in it. Maybe there's no steering wheel. You jump in it, and it takes you to where you want to go. That's an interesting idea, but then you start to take it even further. And I was listening to a gentleman that's actually going to speak in my class today, Andreas Antonopoulos, who's a big Bitcoin guy, I guess we would call him. And he's written several books about Bitcoin, but in one of them, he mentions the idea of, why does a car even need an owner? Okay, well, couldn't you just have a car out there with this AI and its autonomous systems, and it does rides, and it collects cryptocurrency to pay for the rides, and it escrows enough in there so that it can get itself upgraded when it needs to. That can pay for its own maintenance, its own fuel, whether that's electric or gas. And so I thought that was a kind of amazing idea. What if you had, totally autonomous infrastructure? Maybe the car then pays the autonomous robot that repairs the road, based on how much traffic it goes. And then so maybe we just let loose these little autonomous systems, and then we have an autonomous infrastructure, and humans don't need to worry about owning cars, and they don't need to worry about repairing roads and things of that nature. Maybe we have autonomous trains that we let loose. I love traveling in Europe because of the trains. We have just a horrible train system here. Like there's one day I would have to drive 90 miles, get on a train. There's one a day to Chicago. Okay. And that would be my only option to, and then if I wanted to go further, I would have to stay overnight and then go further. Whereas, in Europe, you can go just about any time. Every 30 minutes, there's another train or something like that.
Well, definitely mainland Europe, maybe not here.
Right. Okay. But anyway, I thought that was a fascinating idea. Why do we even need to have owners for these things? Take it to the next level.
I mean, that definitely works for big cities or like highly built up places. Where myself and Thomas are from, where there's more pubs than there are stores. There's some work to be done. But would it work where you are?
Well, we definitely have Uber and Lyft, and plenty of options for ride sharing here. There's also a couple options where you can like rent a car for 3 hours if you want to run a bunch of errands or something like that. I forget.
That's pretty cool.
What it's called, but you basically just go up there with your cell phone and unlock the car and then get in it, and you can use it for a couple hours. So a lot of students use that. There's
That must be great for first date.
Yeah. So there's a yeah, exactly. I'm sure it's impressive. So,
let's pull out like a Ferrari or something.
It's better than a scooter.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a number of those that are near to campus that students use. So I would probably be big enough for about 120,000 people here. And we have a campus of about 30,000 students. So it's pretty large student population. So
that's very few.
That's so much bigger than Ireland's. Like, that's huge. How many students are in Maynooth, Jared? Maybe
5,000. I think it's like the population of this town.
Yeah, but like
I'll check it now. I'm not gonna.
Fun fact: there's more people on your campus than there are people living in my village.
Yeah,
in my town,
like 30 times the population.
Right. Yeah,
that's huge. Wow. I always forget how big the scales are in America. Like, we're such a small country. Like, with population of like 5 million over here, and then you go over to America, it's what, like, is it 3?
Yeah, my state is a little bit over 5 million now, and St. Louis is metropolitan area. There's about 2 million. Same as Kansas City, big metropolitan areas. So
13,760 students in Maynooth, and only 360 of them are doctoral students. There's a lot going in for the bachelors, and then just getting out of there.
Odd.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the States is awesome. Like, he's going to handle that kind of stuff. That wouldn't work here. That wouldn't work here at all. And like your college probably isn't even the biggest one. Like there's probably ones with like
Oh, no. Yeah, no, it's
3 times as many.
Yeah, certainly not. Yeah, it's there's good things and bad things. I grew up in a really small town of about 1,000 people, and my high school class was about 28 people. And so I really loved coming here. I went to school here as an undergraduate student, and I loved it because I loved the anonymity. Because in my hometown, if you smoked a cigarette and had a beer underneath the bleachers at the football game, your mom knew about it before you even got out from underneath the bleachers. So I really love the fact that you could go places and you didn't see people you knew. So for me, it was very liberating. I found it to be great to be in this big place. Many of my colleagues from that high school didn't do well when they went to big schools. They needed that individual attention. So that's also a way I think we could look at AI as helping students say, okay, here's my personality, here's where I deal well. Rather than letting the institution drive the sale of where you go to, where am I going to be successful at? And might say, well, Scott, based on your personality, you would do great at a big institution. Thomas, you really should go to a small one, whatever it is. So kind of empower some students to get some help, get some advice that's unbiased, because of course, we're always wanting every student to come here to the University of Missouri, right? And of course, we only have about 75% that come back the next year. Well, that's actually a pretty high retention rate for the US, but that means 20-some% didn't have a good fit here, didn't have a good experience here, and have gone somewhere else or have dropped out. And so I think AI might help those 25%. But once again, if we empower the student and not empower the institution, right?
Yeah.
That's a really good idea. We have something like that over here where it's like a thing for a job. Like it'll tell you what job suits your personality and your everything like that. I don't think people go for it at all. It's not as...
Do you mean the like 13 personalities quiz you can do?
Yeah, that thing.
I think that's universal. Would you do that in the States?
Yeah, there's various things like that where you take a survey and they'll say, well, here's the jobs that you'd be good at, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it can change. Like you're not going to be the same person forever, ideally. So yeah.
Yeah, they're finding that they used to think that your personality was kind of hard set after you're 25, but they're finding that personalities do in fact change a lot over your lifetime.
What do you think that is? Think people are more open these days?
No, I think it's probably been the same, but I think it's the way we remember ourselves. So we probably remember the things from our past that enforce the way we are today, and we've forgotten the things that don't match up, that don't jive with that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, some people think that we're living in an AI ourselves, right? That we're
simulation theory.
Yeah, this is all one big simulation. And one of the ways they point to is how bad human memory is, because they say, well, it's just created when we need it. You wouldn't actually build a whole memory in a simulation, right? You just create it when you need it. And so human memory seems to be really particularly bad. And so maybe that's because it's just being built when we need it.
You're freaking me out, Scott.
How much do you subscribe to that theory?
I would like to think it's not true, but it seems like a pretty compelling argument. It's really hard to put a lot of holes in it. So,
and it doesn't take much to do. Like, how far away would we be from doing that ourselves? Being able to pull off a simulation like that.
Yeah, you probably know better than me, being folks that sound like you do some gaming and such, but it seems to me that even these little simulations where you can run things and let it run on its own, are pretty interesting in seeing how they evolve. So you can imagine a system in the future that would be able to do that kind of thing. There's you guys are probably familiar with Neil Stephenson. He's a science fiction writer. He wrote a book called Cryptonomicon. You might want to check it out. It's pretty good. He's a good science fiction author. He wrote one, Neil Stephenson. And he also wrote a book called Remedy, which looks like when you first see it, you think it says read me, but it's Remedy. and that was kind of a thriller. But then his next book was called Fall or Dodge in Hell. And in this particular case, a billionaire dies, and he forgets that he has entered into a contract to have his brain scanned and uploaded into the cloud or into an AI. And kind of what he goes through as he kind of works out his new reality in this AI. So it's an interesting book. It's actually a really good audiobook if you can get that from your library. You can follow along on audio. But after listening to that, I've decided I do not want in any way to be uploaded into the cloud after I die. Okay.
Yeah.
I do not want to experience that or to have any part of me live on in that way. So
No.
It's kind of like the thing in Altered Carbon, like there's like this little disc they put like the base of your neck or something, and it had your consciousness, and no matter how many times you died, they just put it back in.
Right.
Only way to actually kill someone was to break it.
Yeah.
That's pretty freaky. I'm pretty sure you could probably do something like that eventually. Like, will Neuralink ever get to a point where you can upload your consciousness? That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, I'll be dead by then. So.
Yeah, you're not planning on it now. It'd be
That'll be
interesting,
something you guys have to deal with. So.
But imagine like the greatest minds of our time, if they're willing to do that, have them forever. Like I don't know. I was about to say Bill Nye, but that's a terrible one. He's not even a scientist. if Neil deGrasse Tyson was like, yeah, I'll put my head in a fucking jar, like Futurama, and then I don't know, he forever like research so on. That'd be pretty interesting. Or like the Muskie man himself, Elon, if he did that as well, I guess he could run his company forever. Have the Mars base all set up. Blah, blah, blah.
Did you hear he wants to die on Mars?
Yeah,
his whole thing. That's mad.
Cool.
That's so cool.
I can live with that. Sure, if you get us there, why not? You're the first person buried on Mars.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, but he's a lizard person. He's not going to die anyway.
No. They're all lizard people. All the scientists in the world.
You see why he got his hairline back? Yeah. Classic lizard person.
Yeah. It was scales, and then they come out of the scales.
Yeah.
I think that helps.
But I was here to say, we haven't really touched much on the Terminator side of AI. Like, if there is a scenario in which we do kind of fuck ourselves up thanks to AI, how do you think it's going to go? I hope it won't be on purpose.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that we're going to kill ourselves some way before we get to that point. So I think there's kind of a dangerous democratization of AI. So I can, for example, I've got a little tiny thing that you guys may have heard of called a microbit. So this is popular in Europe. A small little processor here with some inputs and outputs. Now I can actually train this with an AI algorithm in the cloud, and I can download that model to it. Okay, so it can't do AI on its own, but I can train a neural net using a bigger computer, and then I can download the pattern recognition. So the fact that I can use that AI to now download to very cheap, very readily available microprocessor and have it do things. So that's pretty scary, because you can imagine terrorists, thinking about how could I use this so that, the next time I hear big roars of crowds, I set off this, explosive device or some other thing, God forbid. But I think we're starting to see AI getting to the point where it's not going to be something like nuclear bombs where there's a barrier to entry, right? So if I need to make a nuclear bomb, there's a lot of barriers to entry. I got to find radioactive materials, I got to refine it, I got to put it in different things. But for AI, because of the internet and the way these things are becoming democratized, it's going to be very easy for people to get access to AI. So I think the reality of things like drone swarms being used by terrorists, that type of combat between humans, and where humans may have to turn over the combat to AIs, and then you start to once again look at what are we programming the AI to do? Okay, well, protect Scott. well, Gerald may potentially be a threat someday. So let's go ahead and, nip this in the bud and, and get rid of him. Right. So, you can see all sorts of unintended consequences and not being able to program the ethics into this. So I think there's some really, some really dangerous things about the democratization of AI. There's some really great things, but, we're going to have to sort through all this.
Yeah. You can't really put the human into it. Like, I love it for the fact, like, it can do image sharpening. It can make I don't know, a game that wouldn't go very well on your computer actually work. I love that kind of stuff. But then, Terminator scenario, it nukes us, or like, protect Scott. That's scary stuff. Yeah, imagine that, like, for like a president or something, protect the president, and then it just gets something wrong. It identifies like a flashing camera as like a rifle or something.
Right.
And it just goes on a seek and destroy.
Yeah. Or how about Scott matches a pattern of, white 52-year-old males that have gotten radicalized on YouTube. He seems like the type of person that would, invade the Capitol or something. So he matches this pattern that we've seen with previous folks. So let's go ahead and arrest him now. You could imagine an AI bodyguard. If you want a Google Skydio, it's a drone company that actually has a drone that will follow you. So you just tell it to follow Scott, and I can go underneath the trees. I can go wherever. It will follow me all around. Well, that could be great for lots of applications. So, for example, we did have a criminal. Somebody robs the pub. Well, you could say, follow that guy until we, find what rock he's hiding under or what trees climbed up. So it could be lots of great applications, but, maybe we're going to have AI bodyguards. Maybe our famous singer Shakira is going to have an AI drone sitting over her head to not only take the latest Instagram pics, but also to make sure there's none of her known stalkers out in the audience there. Right. So
that gets pretty terrifying when it gets to, like, I guess, terrorism prevention, like before like someone acts on it, because it can fuck up.
Right.
You could just be some lad. I know it might identify that people who watch like a lot of Alex Jones or Ben Shapiro are going to be more likely to do it. Right. And then you're just sitting around like, I'll watch a Ben Shapiro video, and then fucking 2 weeks later, your door's smashed and you're under arrest. You could be a terrorist one day.
Right.
That is terrifying. That it could just kind of take a guess that, looking back on other cases, they're more likely to be a terrorist. Grab them. That is really like authoritarian, scary stuff.
So there's all sorts of weird places here that we go in. And with my students, I often say that, we have to balance this kind of creepy versus convenience, right? Another area that you could look at for predictive analytics and predictive AI is depression. So you can actually tell if a person is becoming depressed based on their voice. So there's been several AIs that are very accurate at this. And so we might have Scott wear a little wristband. In fact, Amazon has one that will actually do this and will tell you what your mood was in the past. It has a microphone. You can't order stuff from Amazon, but it'll just listen to you constantly.
That must be great for your ads.
Yeah. So once again, maybe that's good. Maybe, we want to intervene before Scott, does some sort of self-harm or something, God forbid. So that would be good. Or maybe we would catch somebody before they did something bad, before he went out and hurt somebody. But, there's a level of creepiness there, invasion of privacy and invasion of thought. Don't I have the right to become depressed? Don't I have my own agency in these things?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking there. Like, the idea is it's listening in constantly, and because it could be used for good, like exactly what you're saying, but it could also be used for like fucking terrible stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Like drunk people get their hands on that stuff, and next thing you know, your privacy is just gone out the window.
Well, most of it is anyway.
No, yeah, no,
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
And, and there's lots of different cultural differences in this area. So in China, much more, they're used to kind of an authoritarian state. They have this kind of social credit score that's based on all these different inputs. So you may not be able to get a first class train ticket because your social credit score is bad because we saw you throwing a cigarette on the street, or the facial recognition saw you doing that, and other sorts of things that have been added into this metric. So how AI is used is going to also differ by cultures. There's another interesting website you might want to check out called The Moral Machine. It was the MIT did this thing where they reran the trolley problem. You're probably familiar with the old trolley problems, like, grandpa is there and he's minding his own business, but then on the track there's 4 children, and so do you throw the switch and kill grandpa, all that kind of stuff. Well, they kind of reran this, but with autonomous vehicles. So do you want the car to veer off and potentially kill you, or do you want it to, hit the kids or whatever? And they found that this varied based on some cultures. So in Japan, they tend to revere older folks. So they would say, if it was between Thomas and me, they would say, well, Scott's old, he's, should be respected. And so, go after Thomas there. But here in the Western cultures, we tend to view youth as being good. Well, Scott has had a good life, he's old, gonna die pretty soon anyway. Let's make sure that Thomas is well protected, right? So in this scenario, it's very interesting. Do we reprogram our self-driving cars based on where we're selling them? Does Tesla reprogram them? So there's lots of weird things we have to deal with here.
And just let Scott, if it was me, I would choose myself. You're not done yet, sir.
Jesus.
Thank you for that. You're a valiant warrior there.
Yeah. And I guess, do you have any predictions for? Because we're going to finish up soon, but do you have any predictions for where AI is going in the next 5 years?
Huge amount of automation and autonomous systems. We're going to see the results of the coronavirus really pouring this accelerant on AI's use in things like supply chain. I think we're going to see entire grocery stores and delivery systems that are not going to involve humans anymore. So I would suspect in our metropolitan areas, St. Louis and Kansas City, we will have grocery stores that are entirely, you can't go into. They're basically a distribution center, but out the side pops an autonomous vehicle that's going to deliver my groceries to my suburban home, and I will use my phone to unlock it, grab my groceries out of it, and then it'll wheel on to the next delivery. I think that may be coming in 5 years, and it's going to be because this COVID crisis that's going to really be accelerated. So I would just look for an acceleration, and I would say that we all need to start to hold our institutions accountable. So our higher education institutions, if you start to see a bunch of cameras deployed, ask, is there facial recognition technology being used behind that? If you are applying for a loan, who's deciding this loan? Have you outsourced that to a third party, and that third party is now using some AI to decide whether I get this loan? Start asking questions, because we're going to see this stuff just creeping into our lives to a great degree.
Wow.
It's just, I know you're right, and I really hope you're not. that's what gets me here. It's just, it's coming. Got to deal with it. You may at least enjoy it for playing games for now.
Right.
That's what I'll do. It's just dodgy stuff. I wonder, is it being used in filmmaking? Because sometimes you get like a dodgy shot. When it can AI like improve that, or if a shot you think is already brilliant, it can make it even better.
Oh, I think so. I think there's lots of developments in AI and cleaning up things, reanimating dead actors. That's another whole issue. You know, if
Yeah.
I've signed, I was prayed. I'm blank. Carrie Fisher, you know, played Princess Leia. Well, now we want to make another Star Wars movie. Does Disney have the rights to reanimate her in some sort of AI? Or does her estate own that? So I think if I was a lawyer for these folks, I'd be looking very carefully at what I'm signing. So am I signing in perpetuity that this person's image could be used? There's actually a case recently where a institution had a course. It was an online course that had videos and, you know, discussion boards and all that kind of good stuff. But the professor had died last spring. But they went ahead and released it this past fall. And it was about 4 weeks in that the students discovered, hey, I tried to reach this guy and he's dead.
Oh, yes, I heard about that. Yeah, I remember that.
And so, you know, does the university, you know, there's plenty of images out there of me now. They could go even one step further, not just take my materials and my videos, but say, okay, well, Scott's going to have office hours, you know, in 2075. Do we really want to have that? What does my contract say about my use of my image after my separation with the university? So
that's just freaky. And even with, like, you know, deepfake technology, they can just like put your face in someone else. Like, they might say, like, Scott is the most ideal looking professor we have. We want everyone to look like him. Yeah. And everyone's sitting here in Zoom and they have the AI putting the Scott face on everyone.
Yep.
Like, you could be there for 20 years and they could still be doing it.
Yep. You just find somebody on Fiverr for, you know, $2 an hour and
read a script.
Yep. Read a script.
Avoid answering questions.
Yeah. I think we might be onto something.
As a business idea. But Scott, you've been a great guest. It's fucking so insightful. It's been so fun. Yeah, maybe we'll have you back on in 5 years. Hopefully you're right. But
or my AI, my avatar will at least will agree to come back. So
that'd be sick.
But before you head on, if you want to check out, where can I find you?
You can find me online at Twitter, jscottmo. Also, I have a little newsletter called The Free Range Technologist, where I just talk about these kind of cool sites that I stumble upon, like universal paper clips and those types of things that I discover. So you can find that at frt.news. And so there's no .com, just frt.news, and it's a Substack newsletter. And I send that out every month or so. And that's probably a good way to find me and to find other interesting stuff.
Awesome.
Perfect. Okay, so if you want to check them out, you know where to find them. And as we say, thanks for watching and stay away from yourself. Good luck.
All right, take care.
Top of the morning, lads and ladies. Support for the Awfully Irish podcast is now brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming.
Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels, and you're no longer need the look of the Irish with the ladies. Manscaped just launched in Ireland. We've gone years without using the right tools for the job. You can now be one of the first men in Ireland to experience their life-changing products.
Your balls will thank you.
Get 20% off and free shipping with the code IrishPod at manscaped.com.
That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code IrishPod.